I hope you guys took notes. Sorry. Other questions about these sentences?
Second one,
Yeah.
the phrase is Juniji ni kan. Where does the ni come from? Is that
Okay,
not
so
understanding?
okay, so this one. So 私は土曜日に12時間. Oh, that's what's wrong there. I didn't even see that. My eye went right past it. Juniji kan is 12 hours. Is that what the person meant? I don't know who wrote this one, but
I don't know what happened either.
okay.
So that was
Yeah, but you meant that you slept for 12 hours
Yeah.
on that day, right? So yeah, that ni didn't belong there. So it should be juniji kan, meaning 12 hours, right? So 私は土曜日に12時間寝ました. That's what that one's saying. So sorry that I didn't even notice the extra ni in there. When I first read it, I think I noticed it, which is why it confused me, but then my brain kind of deleted it in my head without realizing that it was still up there on the board.
Yeah, because you were so confused by it not being in kanji.
Yeah, because the kanji isn't that hard, and it's one of those where I feel like, why didn't they just go ahead and teach it already? It's not that hard. It's the door radical, which you guys know from when we did radicals, right? And then a sun on the inside, which makes sense because it's talking about the time duration, and a lot of time words in Japanese have a sun in them, right? So it's one of those that I was like, why can't they just teach that one already?
I want to make sure we know how to spell it.
Yeah. Well, and it's the same kanji that means aida, between, which I always found interesting because, you know, if you're between two things, well, if you're drawing something on a timeline, between 2 o'clock and 3 o'clock is 1 hour. Yeah, yeah. So, yeah, between, you know, could mean a time between or a distance between, right? But when you're talking about duration of time, from this time to that time, between 2 o'clock and 3 o'clock, kind of works, right? So, yeah, but if you look at, see, I don't know if there's a place where there's a phrase using kan in kanji.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it should be in there somewhere.
I pretty much heard kanji.
Yeah.
Ichiji kan imachimashita.
Yeah, is there a place where it's showing you the kanji?
Number 6 there is where
I'm having a hard time. Number 6 of which?
grammar points.
Oh, okay. In the grammar explanation area, ichiji kan. Yeah, there it is. Yeah.
Also in the very first one, jikan ga arimasu ka.
Okay. Yeah, and then if you look at the Ida stuff, they're just doing that in hiragana, it looks like. Oh yeah, in the vocab list, where they're giving you the little picture and the location words in context, they actually show you Ida in kanji there. So you can see it.
Oh.
See? So, yeah. I like the stuff. That's one of the things I like about kanji, is that the concept so often makes sense. There's so, you know, those abstract concepts have logic to them when you know the kanji for them, and sometimes I find, at least, that it helps me remember. If I know what a kanji means, then learning new compounds that include that kanji, they often make more sense. If I know that this kanji means this and that kanji means that, you put them together and, oh yeah, that compound makes a lot of sense. Yeah. So like gozen and gogo, for example, are literally noon after and noon before. Gozen is noon before, gogo is noon after. And that go that means after is the same go that means ato, which is another phrase that means after, like after I do this. And that zen is the same kanji as mae, which means in front of as well as before. So there's a lot of logic to a lot of this. So anyway, we're going to do some speaking practice next. Okay, so part E is what we're up to. So you're going to take turns asking each other what you did on whichever day of the week you feel like picking, okay? And the other person's going to just come up with an answer. And remember, it doesn't have to be what you actually did on that day. If you can't think of something to say about that day, you can make something up. Nobody's going to know the difference anyway. We don't know which day you went and saw a movie last week or whatever, so you can pick what you want to say. Okay, but it's just good practice to comprehend what somebody is asking you and then try to answer it. Okay, any volunteers who want to start? I'm always picky on Sierra to go first, so I wanted to give somebody else an opportunity if they feel like being first.
To read the example, or?
Yeah, we can start with the example, and then everybody's going to have a turn, and then whoever does the example will come back around to them, and they can do a free-form one. Okay, dozo. Okay, you can read the question. Tatiana, can we go your direction? Okay, so.
Sure. 月曜日に何をしましたか?
Hi, so that easy, right? So now you ask Jack a question. Any day of the week that you want to pick.
日曜日に何をしましたか?
デパートを行きます。
Depato, direction of movement. The direction of movement, not location at which you did an action. So, neat. There you go.
デパートに行きました。
Hi, there you go. Okay, now you get to ask Sierra.
土曜日に何をしましたか? Hi, Hono yomimashita. That works. Okay, now you get to ask Andrea. Okay, if you're using kino, you don't need ni.
Okay.
So if you're doing a day of the week, you need ni, but if you're doing kino, you don't need ni.
Kino. I still say nani?
Yeah.
Okay, right. Okay. Nani o shimashita ka?
Kino, nani o shimashita ka?
Christmas kaimono shimashita.
Ah, Christmas no kaimono o shimashita. Right. いいですね。どうぞ。
土曜日に何をしましたか?
コーヒーを飲みました。
はい。Okay, now you can ask.
土曜日に何をしましたか? T シャツを買いました。
はい。いいですね。And now one last original question.
Yeah. Let's do 火曜日に何をしましたか?
学に行きました。
Okay, but since we're here now also, you can say 大学に来ました。
Okay.
Yeah, because generally speaking, if you're in the place that you're talking about, you would use 来ます, even if we're talking about a previous time that you came. Okay, いいですね。じゃあ、パート5、コーヒーも飲みます。So you guys remember when we did も before? And what did it replace? Wa, right? So anytime you've got like person A is doing this and person B is also doing the same thing, you can put the mo in where the wa was, right? But what if it's the same person doing two different things? Then you can actually put the mo other places in the sentence based upon where that point of contrast is. So what they're showing you here is that you can replace the, here they're showing you with a wa, ハンバーガーは200円です。コーヒーも200円です。Right? But I believe this is the chapter where they're introducing that it can go in more than just that one place, right? If you look at the explanation, they're talking about the fact that, you can do like, メアリーさんは靴を買いました。メアリーさんはカバンも買いました。Right? Because Mary bought two different things. She bought shoes, and then she also bought a bag. Right? So in English, you don't really think about, well, where do I have to put the also? Because you kind of know because it's your native language, right? But in Japanese, if it's a point of contrast, that's what you're looking for is, look at the two sentences. The Meri-san is the same in both, right? The kaimashita is the same in both. Where is it different? Kutsu versus kaban. You see that? We're looking at the example sentence on 111. Do you see that? Sorry, I turned back to the grammar explanation section. Okay, but you see that? So you see that their contrast point is in a different position in the sentence, right? It's not the subject anymore, now it's the object. So that's where the mo goes, because that's the contrast. Do you see that? Okay, so that's the first point, to understand that if you've got parallel structure in Japanese, just compare the two sentences side by side. The one place where it's different, that's where the mo is going to belong. Does that make sense? Now, when it's a particle wa, particle ga, or particle o, those are all particles that basically go on subjects or objects, right? Those are all subject or object type markers. Those always get replaced by mo when that's where the mo belongs. But when you're talking about ni or e or de, those, by contrast, the mo gets added instead of replacing the original particle. Do you get what I'm saying? So let's say, so let's say you're talking about, I want to go, I'm going to go to Tokyo, and I'm also going to go to Osaka when I go to Japan, right? So, Tokyo ni ikimasu, Osaka ni mo ikimasu. Make sense? So same deal with particle e, if you're going to use that for going someplace. Tokyo e ikimasu, Osaka e mo ikimasu. I'm going to go to Tokyo. I'm also going to go to Osaka. Okay, same thing with time phrases. Nichiyobi ni ikimasu. Doyobi ni mo ikimasu. I'm going to go on Sunday, and I'm also going to go on the following Saturday. You know, or whatever the case may be, right? Niji ni ikimasu. Goji ni mo ikimasu. I'm going to go at 2 o'clock, and I'm going to go again at 5 o'clock. You know, or read, or whatever it is going to be, right? Niji ni benkyou shimasu. 6 ni mo benkyou shimasu. I'm going to study at 2 o'clock, and I'm going to study again at 6 o'clock. Make sense? Okay, same thing with de. You could say something like, Tokidoki restaurant de sushi o tabemasu. Uchi de mo sushi o tabemasu. Sometimes I eat sushi at a restaurant, but I also eat sushi at home. Right? You can say both.
It's kind of a strange statement, but
Yeah, but you get the point, right? I mean, there are people who know how to make sushi, so you can eat it at home. Or you could buy takeout and take it home with you and eat it at home, right? So, you know, any place that you can use a de statement, like, you know, uchi de hono yomimasu. Toshokan de mo hono yomimasu. Right? I read books at the house. I also read books in the library. Right? Both things are possible. So if you're saying both, that's where the mo comes in. Does that make sense? And yes, sometimes they end up being sort of awkward seeming sentences. But the point here was to show you how the grammar of it works. That if it's wa, ga, or o, you replace with mo, right? If it's ni, de, or e, you add mo after that particle. Okay? So let's go ahead and practice by inserting the mo wherever it happens to belong in the sample sentences. So you might want to go ahead and read the two as they're typed first, and then restate it with the mo. If you're, you know, if you can't do it on the fly. Okay, we're going to let Donan-san do ichiban.
Takeshi-san wa Tokyo o kaemashita. I'm just going to go ahead. Takeshi-san wa kaban mo kaemashita.
Hai, kaban mo kaemashita. You saw the point of contrast easily, so you just did it.
Right next to each other.
Right. いいですね。じゃあ、Tatiana-san, 2番お願いします。
so are we reading both or only reading one?
Read them both, but the second one is going to take a mo. So if you want to do it on the fly, you can. If you want to read it as typed first and then restate it with the mo, that's okay too.
Robato-san wa Nihongo o benkyou shimasu. Medi-san wa Nihongo o benkyou shimasu. So Medi-san wa Medi-san mo Nihongo o benkyou shimasu.
Hi, you found the point of contrast, right? Does everybody see what she did? She looked for where the second sentence was the same and where it was different from the first one. That place where it's different, that's what takes the mo. Good job. Okay, 3番、Jack-san.
たけしさんは土曜日にアルバイトをします。たけしさんも日曜日にアルバイトをします。
Okay, is that the point of contrast?
That's very much.
But Takeshi-san is the same for both.
It goes after the
Yeah.
where the contrast.
Yeah, because particles always go after the noun they're marking, right? So the mo is going to go in that particle spot. So it's going to go after the point of contrast, not before it. Okay, so restate the second sentence. Where should the mo go for part B there? Okay, so go ahead and say it that way. Yeah, Takeshi-san wa is correct. Okay, but what did we just say about placing the mo with ni, de, or e? What does it do? Instead of replacing it, where does it go? Goes right after it, right? So try again with the ni, mo together. Hi, that's the one that sounds right. Okay, so that's why I want you guys to practice, because it's not instinctive for you guys, because it's not your first language. You don't just automatically do it perfect, because you got to practice first, right? That's the way it works whenever it's not your own language, right? So Takeshi-san wa doyobi ni arubaito o shimasu. Takeshi-san wa nichiyobi ni mo arubaito o shimasu. じゃあ、シエラさん、4番。
I keep wanting to call her America because
Oh.
I keep thinking America, right?
Yeah.
Mary-san wa o chide
うちで、yeah.
で日本語を話しますMary-sanは
学校
でも日本語を話します
はい、話します。はい、メアリーさんはうちで日本語を話します。メアリーさんは学校でも日本語を話します。いいですね。So obviously they're talking about where she's living in Japan now. At home with her host family, she speaks Japanese. At school, she also speaks Japanese. Right? じゃあ、アンジェラさん。
明日、メアリーさんはたけしさんに会います。
はい。
明日、メアリーさんはスーさんにも会います。
はい、そうですね。So she's going to go see Takeshi tomorrow, and she's also going to see Sue. Right? Maybe, maybe she's hanging out with Takeshi in the morning, and then she's going to go see Sue in the afternoon or something. Right? じゃあ、エイブリーさん、6番。
先週デパートに行きました。昨日もデパートに来ました。
はい、デパートに行きました。Notice there's no particle there, but that's the point of contrast, so you just add the mo where a particle would go if there were one, right? Because senshu and kino don't normally have to take particles, right? But in the case of the mo, because you're making that contrast, senshu departo ni ikimashita, kino mo departo ni ikimashita. You need the mo there because of the contrast, right? You went to the department store last week, and then you went again yesterday. Maybe you didn't finish all your Christmas shopping yet, so you went back. Okay. Any questions about how that mo works? Okay, so now, instead of giving you the whole sentence, and you just have to put the mo in where it belongs, now they're just giving you the pictures and some of the information. And they want you to figure out, okay, which one's the point of contrast here, and put this two sentences together for yourself. Right? So for the example, it says, Yamamoto-san wa gakusei desu. Tanaka-san mo gakusei desu. So the point of commonality is that they're both students, right? The point of contrast is that they're two different people, right? Two different names. So person A, wa, person B, mo. Make sense? Okay, じゃあ、ドゥンさん、1番お願いします。
今田さんはパーティーをパーティーに行きます。
はい。
行きました。
行きます。Because it says go to, not went to.
Ah, you're right. So, 山口さんもパーティーに行きます。
はい、そうですね。じゃあ、2番、タティアナさん。
たけしさんはご飯を食べました。
OK、食べました。
たけしさんはパンも食べました。
はい、そうですね。He ate rice and he also ate bread. じゃあ、ジャックさん、3番。
Is that Christopher?
I think that's supposed to be Robert. ロバートさん。
Oh, okay. ロバートさんはコーヒーを飲みました。
はい
ロバートさんはお茶も飲みました。
はい、いいですね。じゃあ、シアラさん、4番。Wow, she's multi-talented. She can speak English and Spanish.
Wizard.
メリーさんは
スペイン語。
スペイン語 No, okay.
First one is
Right.
going to take O. スペイン語を
スペイン語を and then
はい、話します。はい。
and then メリーさん英語
メリーさんは
は
英語も話します。Okay. So the way to group the particles so that you know which ones get replaced and which ones get added to. Okay, what am I writing here? So wa, ga, o get replaced by mo. Okay, and okay, so X the original and put mo instead. Plus mo is going to be ni, and de. Okay, so the way I think about the contrast is all three of these are either subject or object markers. They're all talking about either the subject or the object of the sentence, and they all get replaced by mo. These three are the different ones. Time, direction of movement, location at which something happens. They're more active, sort of. And so one way to think about it is if you lost ni or e or de, it would be hard to tell what was actually happening, right? So you need them. So even if you're adding a mo in, you can't replace them because you still need to know whether somebody's going to a place or whether something's happening at a certain time or whether somebody's doing something in a certain location. Those functions are sort of necessary to understand the sentence. Okay, does that make sense? So that's one reason why you have to add the mo instead of replacing the other particle with it. But these guys, the wa, the ga, the o, mo kind of serves a similar function sometimes in that it sort of seems sort of topic marker-ish. So it can kind of take the place of the wa, the ga, or the o. Does that make any sense? So that's the contrast between the two. And for myself, you know, at first I didn't really necessarily feel the difference between the two categories I just sort of had to memorize. Wa, ga, o get replaced by mo. Mi, e, de, add the mo. I just had to sort of memorize them as those two groups, and I didn't have a good rhyming mnemonic for this side. Only the wa, ga, o replaced by mo. That part kind of rhymes. So I just had to memorize it at first. Later, as I got more comfortable with the language, it started to feel like it made sense. But a lot of this stuff that, it feels like it makes sense to me now because I'm fluent now. So, I've broken through that barrier, sort of. Once I started dreaming in Japanese, I was through that barrier and things started to make sense.
Dreaming in Japanese. Okay.
Yeah. So, but until you get to that point, some of this stuff you just have to memorize it as a rule and, work with it that way and realize that, yes, sometimes you're going to make mistakes and so be it. Once you get through that barrier, when you've lived immersed in the language long enough, when you've started dreaming in the language for a while, you get to a point where things just sort of sound right when they're right and sound wrong when they're wrong. You do that all the time with your native language, you don't think about it. Nobody has to remind you, oh, don't use the there, use a. You're reading a book or you're reading the book. What's the difference? Nobody has to explain that to you. You just kind of know. There are times when I'm reading the book makes more sense, and there are times when I'm reading a book makes more sense. And you know the meaning difference between those without having to be told it, right? Non-native speakers don't have that. They have to have that explained to them dozens of times before they finally get it. That I know from experience teaching ESL. But teacher, why? That was my students' favorite question when I was teaching ESL.
Just it.
Yeah, sorry guys, English is an illogical, crazy language. I can't explain it any better than that. So, every language has that kind of stuff where it doesn't necessarily make sense to you at first. You just kind of have to memorize it, and eventually you get used to it. So this is one of those things that you might just have to memorize it for now. Over time, you'll get comfortable with it. Okay? So, and that's why we do so much repetitive practice, because it helps you reach that comfort level. The comfort level that a native speaker has because they've heard it used in context a zillion times as a baby before they ever open their mouth to try to use it correctly for the very first time. That level of comfort is something that we lack as non-native speakers because we haven't been immersed in it long enough. Nobody had to tell my babies what the word eat meant. They just kind of picked it up, right? Oh, you want to eat something? They learned it from living it. But you have to learn the verb taberu in Japanese class because you didn't grow up in Japan. That's just life, right? So, okay, 5番. Let's move on. Okay, we don't necessarily know her name. You can make one up, or you can...
Well, the photographer is the one doing the action.
Okay, so...
Photographer. Oh,
Yeah, you can make the sentence about the guy taking the photo, and we can make up a name for him too, if you want to.
Leave it off.
Or you could just leave off the subject entirely, right? So,
It might be Kimura.
so the main point of the sentences are that someone is taking photos in the park and someone's taking photos at the temple as well, right?
Okay.
So first you have to remember how to say taking photos, right? We forgot to do vocab review today at the beginning of class. Whoops. depends. I mean, are you addressing them directly, you guys?
Okay. あなたたちは写真をします。
写真を撮ります. But the contrast point is the location, so you need that in the sentence.
公園にあなたたちは選手を取ります。
Okay, you're getting a little confused. Okay, so koen is the location at which something is happening, an action is happening, right? So it's going to be what?
公園で
Yes, koen, sorry. Koen de. And then what's the vocabulary for photo again?
写真
Yeah, shashin, particle o, and then verb
取ります。
torimasu. Right? So, koen de shashin o torimasu. Right? And then this contrast, the second sentence is going to be,
お寺で
okay, so, o tera de,
写真をも
o tera de mo
撮ります。
shashin o torimasu. Okay, do you see why the mo goes there? Does that make sense now?
You're saying the temple too.
Right.
Temple as well.
Right, so she's, they're taking photos in the park and they're also taking photos in the temple, right? And we don't have to have a subject stated in the sentence. It's not necessary because it's the same for both sentences, so it can be just implied or understood, right? I mean, they haven't taught you the word yet for tourists, because that would be my first thought of what subjects put on there. The tourists are taking pictures in the park and also in the temple, right?
And a flower. Do you think that they write that way because it was invented by a left-handed writer or something?
No, I think the style of writing, vertical and right to left, comes from the fact that, and this is a theory that's based in like what some of my calligraphy teachers taught me, but the way they used to write was, let's see, here's your calligraphy pen. This was the hold for a calligraphy pen, and they would hold it in such a way that their whole arm and wrist were up off of the page, and they would like sweep the sleeve back if they had big sleeves so that it wouldn't get into the ink. And because you're drawing with ink on paper, by going down, especially if you've got a slight tilt to your page, the ink tends to want to run down anyway. So if you're writing on a desk with a little bit of a tilt to it, you're kind of dragging the pen along and bringing the excess ink with you into the next line and the next line and the next line. So it kind of makes sense, because that excess ink, if it doesn't get used as you go, it's going to blot the page and make a big wet black sticky mark that doesn't dry as easily.
Funny that they
That makes
come from
sense.
this-
It's more the
Yeah.
the
And then I think the
left or right.
directionality of it, I mean, the majority of Asian people are right-handed too, just like everywhere else in the world. So the directionality of it, I think, just had to do with customs and habits.
Well, I mean, because in Europe they condemned left-handedness and all that
Yeah.
stuff. So
Chi-
maybe it's
Chinese
because it-
culture, Japanese culture didn't necessarily like left-handedness either. I don't know how ancient China felt about it. I know that in more recent years in Japan, it's been preferred that people be right-handed, to the point where some parents even like train left-handedness out of their kids. If they notice their kid trying to do stuff lefty, they will take the pen or chopsticks away from them and make them put it in their right hand. I used to know a little boy who would sit there with his chopsticks in his right hand because that's what his parents were making him do. But he would pick up the food with his left hand and stuff it in his face with his fingers. But he was 3, you know. But,
Yeah, because it seemed like it would be easier to write in Japanese if you're left-handed, because then you're pulling it in that direction.
Well, yeah, with a pencil, because you can see what you've already written.
with a pen, it does. With a calligraphy brush, it doesn't necessarily matter which direction. I don't think.
Well, because you're pulling it in this direction,
Yeah.
it's easier to write in English, not
Yeah.
if you're right-handed. 'Cause you're pulling it.
But you're talking about using a ballpoint pen. Calligraphy brush is a different feel. So that I don't think has anything to do with it, honestly. Yeah.
Well, because if you're writing with a calligraphy brush, and then even though you're not touching it, but if it was getting in the ink as you were writing sideways.
Yeah. So anyway, I don't know for sure. That's one of those questions that might be just too lost to history because it was so long ago. So anyway, 6番どうぞ。
うちで勉強します。
はい。
図書館でも勉強します。
はい、いいですね。And notice he was able to leave out the Meiri-san wa for both of those because it's not necessary to always put the subject there. はい。じゃあ7番どうぞ。
Quite sure how to say this. So I just went 土曜日に会いました。日曜日にも会いました。
Okay, they met on Saturday and they also met on Sunday.
We know who we're talking about.
Yeah. Or you could say 土曜日にデートをしました。日曜日にもデートをしました. Because I think the little heart there and the way they're holding on to each other is supposed to indicate that they're dating. So, yeah, you don't see a lot of couples linked arms like that in Japan unless they're actually dating. You wouldn't, or even married perhaps. You don't see a lot of like one man, one woman holding hands or linking arms or whatever in Japan. It's still sort of frowned upon for dating couples to show too much affection in public. You're a lot more likely to see a group of like 3 middle school girls with their arms all linked walking along as best friends. Yeah, sometimes so many that they're blocking the whole sidewalk and you have to like step in the street to get around them. So, どうぞ. Yeah. はい。はい、そうですね。Because he's got tests coming up, apparently. That's what he's thinking about, テスト. Or it could be 土曜日にテストがあります。木曜日にもテストがあります。It could be either one of those. That he's studying both days because he's got tests coming up, or he's got a test on Tuesday and he's also got a test on Thursday. So there's more than one option for all of these, I think. じゃあ、ザックさん。
メリーさんは東京に行きます。広島にも行きます。
はい、そうですね。She's going both of those places. She's going to go to Tokyo and she's going to go to Hiroshima. Right. No. The assumption is sequential.
It's got a time kernel.
The assumption is that it's going to be sequential. We just don't know which she's doing first. Okay, and being able to state that she's going to do this one, then that one, all in one sentence is something that comes in lesson 6. So that's a next semester thing that we'll learn how to actually put 2 or more verbs together in one sentence and have a sequence that she's going to do this, then this, then this, then this, then that. Yeah, but それから is usually connecting 2 sentences. So 東京に行きます。それから広島に行きます。 So I'm going to go to Tokyo, and then after that I'll go to Hiroshima would be, 2 separate sentences. But in lesson 6 or 7, we learn how to combine those.
Didn't we have one that connects nouns? Oh, you said that was...
Yeah, to connects nouns. So you can say, for example, Tokyo to Hiroshima ni ikimasu. But that, combines it a little differently. So that's more like saying she's going to Tokyo and Hiroshima, like all in one vacation. She's going to spend the first half of her vacation in Tokyo and the second half in Hiroshima. Tokyo ni ikimasu, Hiroshima ni mo ikimasu sounds more like, well, she's going to go to Tokyo, she's also going to go to Hiroshima at some point. But they could be on 2 separate trips. One could be this weekend and the other one could be winter break. Okay. So let's look at ichijikan machimashita. Okay. So Mary did a lot yesterday. Describe how many hours she did each activity. So Shihara-san, we're going to let you read the example for us today that she slept for 8 hours.
Mary-san wa 8 時間は
Nemashita. Yeah. 8時間寝ました. Right. Okay. 1番、Mary-san.
アリさんは2時間テニスをしました。
はい、2時間テニスをしました. Notice that when you've got the 時間 phrase, it doesn't take a particle. Because it's not a time at which, it's an amount of time. はい、じゃあ2番、Mary-san.
Mary-san は3時間勉強しました。
はい、3時間勉強しました。3番、Dylan-san.
Mary さんは1時半間音楽を聴きました。
Hi, that was a good guess. Japanese people do the same thing in English in reverse. So it's actually going to be ichi ji kan. I'm just going ahead and writing the kanji there. Han. Okay, ichi kan han is the word order for an hour and a half. So if you think about it as the English expression 1 hour and a half, it kind of makes sense. Okay. Yeah, Japanese people always have a hard time with that expression in English too.
Well, you can say it either.
Yeah,
1.5 hours.
we say, sometimes we'll say 1.5 hours, yeah. But, sometimes you'll hear a Japanese person say something like 1 hours and a half, or 1 hour's half, because they get confused. And the idiom in English is not self-evident. So, 1時間半 is the expression in Japanese, and that is one of those things where, every language does this its own way, so you just have to learn what it is in that language. Okay, so 1時間半音楽を聴きました, or 聴きます, or whatever. Oh yeah, it's supposed to be yesterday, so 1時間半音楽を聴きました. いいですか? はい、じゃあ、タティアナさん。
メリさんは1時間、ごめんなさい、たけしさんを待ちました。
There you go. Yeah, Takeshi-san o machimashita. That's another one that's counterintuitive a little bit, right? You're not quite sure what to do, but waiting for someone, they treat that as a direct object phrase, that the person you're waiting for, o machimashita. Okay, so I waited for that person. So Takeshi-san o machimashita. She waited for Takeshi. Okay, so Takeshi-san o machimashita. 1時間 Takeshi-san o machimashita. Yeah. If it were me, I'd be annoyed waiting for a whole hour.
Well, maybe she got there early.
Yeah,
Or maybe
well, that's
late.
possible too. But Japanese people are usually pretty prompt, so that would be unusual to be left waiting for an hour. はい、じゃあ、ジャックさん、5番お願いします。
メリーさんは2時間半テレビを見ました。
はい、そうですね。2時間半テレビを見ました。Okay, any questions about those guys? Okay, we've got just enough time to ask a couple of questions. So, Sierra-san, why don't you read question B, the example, the question in part A, and let Andrea answer.
昨日何時間
テレビ
テレビを見ましたか
1時間
ぐらい。
ぐらい見ました。
はい、so 昨日何時間テレビを見ましたか is asking, yesterday, how many hours did you watch TV? Right? 何時間 is literally how many hours. Okay, and 1時間ぐらい見ました. So watched for about 1 hour. Okay, いいですね。じゃあ1番どうぞ。
今日
昨日
昨日何時間勉強しましたか
1時間勉強します。
しました。
しました。
はい。1時間勉強しました。はい。じゃあ2番どうぞ。
昨日何時間寝ましたか
8時間ぐらい寝ました。
いいですね。じゃあ3番どうぞ。
ゲームをしましたか
しますか
しますか、いや。大抵何時間ぐらいゲームをしますか
Okay, so is it asking if I play games?
Yeah, do you
And how
play
many
games?
hours?
Yeah, and about how many hours do you usually spend playing
Sounds
games?
very exciting. Hard time.
はい、ゲームをします。3時間ゲームをします。
Okay, 3時間ゲームをします. Or if you want to be less precise, you could say 3時間ぐらいゲームをします. If it's not exactly 3 hours every time. Okay, どうぞ4番。
インターネットをしますか大抵何時間ぐらいしますか
はい、インターネットをします。2時間インターネットをぐらいします。
Okay, if you're going to do the nijikan and the gurai, keep them together because they're all part of the time phrase. So you can do nijikan gurai, internet o shimasu. Or if you want to, you could do internet o nijikan gurai shimasu. Okay?
Do I just make up one?
Sure, make up a question to ask Sierra. 何時間寝ましたか何時間寝ましたか
Okay. 12
12時間 Nemashita. You slept for about 12 hours?
I slept for an hour and a half before yesterday.
Oh,
So,
okay.
I just,
Okay.いいですね. Okay, so please study what you can over the break. I know you're going to be enjoying your turkey and everything, but study what you can, and when we get back after the break, we will be doing our